What we're doing is I am required.
Just reviewing.
Yes, I am required to get you guys together and
Do you
see all
mind?
the bylaws.
Do you mind if we get started? Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at the Listen, Lunch, and Learn event here at the beautiful sheep pasture. We have Mother Nature giving us what we need, rain. And for those of you who do not know me, my name is Denise Barbosa Lane, and I am the Executive Director of Raising Multicultural Kids. So glad that you're able to be intimate and cozy as we read our book, Listening is an Act of Love. Just to give you a little bit of background, we thought of this project as a result of the Easton Proclamation on Anti-Racism. And we wanted to continue that conversation. We wanted for people to listen to each other because we all have value and we all have a story. So we put together this program. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Jen and Maria, who could not be here. We put together this program so that we could bring the story to the people of Easton. I would like to thank our sponsors, Inclusive Perspective Counseling, Morse Insurance, Farmer's Daughter, Worth Tax, Stephen and Carol Marcus, Ann Fredericks, the Lions Club, and Bank of Easton. So thank you very much. And without further ado, I am going to turn this over to, myself. Okay. We had a little bit of a change in who was coming today, so this wasn't originally my part. So I just want to read a little bit of the introduction of the book, and then each section. The book is made up of 5 sections, 49 different stories. And so to give a little background, we like to read what the book is about, why, the purpose of the book, and then as we read a story from each section, we will introduce that section as well. Okay, so I will begin. StoryCorps is built on a few basic ideas. That our stories, the stories of everyday people, are as interesting and important as the celebrity stories we're bombarded with by the media every minute of the day. That if we take the time to listen, we'll find wisdom, wonder, and poetry in the lives and stories of the people all around us. That we all want to know our lives have mattered and we won't ever be forgotten. That listening is an act of love. Participating in StoryCorps is a simple process. First, you make an appointment to visit one of our recording booths. Bring anyone you choose, your grandmother, your dad, your sister, your best friend, the waitress at the local diner whose story you've always been curious about. A trained StoryCorps facilitator will greet you, take you into the booth, and shut the door. Inside the booth is completely silent. The lights are low, the room is cozy. You sit in a small table across from, let's say, your grandmother, looking into her eyes. There's a microphone in front of each of you. The facilitator sits you down in front of an audio console and presses record. You begin to ask your questions. What are the most important lessons you've learned in life? What did your mother sing to you when you were a baby? How did you want to be remembered? At the end of 40 minutes, 2 broadcast quality CDs have been created. One goes home with you, a second becomes part of an archive at the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress, so that your great-great-grandchildren will someday be able to listen to the voices of you and your grandmother. Excerpts of interviews are broadcast each Friday on NPR's Morning Edition. StoryCorps launched in October 23, 2003 in New York's Grand Central Terminal. The great oral historian Studs Terkel, who was 91 at the time, flew in from Chicago to cut the ribbon. Today, we shall begin celebrating the lives of the uncelebrated, he proclaimed, where in Grand Central Station, we know there was an architect, but who hung the iron? Who were the brick masons? Who swept the floors? There are the non-celebrated people of our country. In the booth, the non-celebrated will speak of their lives. It might be a grandmother speaking to a grandchild. It might be a kid talking to his uncle. It might be a neighbor talking to a neighbor, and suddenly they will realize that they are the ones who have built this country. Since that day, we've added another permanent booth at Ground Zero and launched 3 mobile recording studios that travel the country year-round gathering stories. Each session represents an act of love and respect. 40 minutes set aside to ask important questions and listen closely to the answers. The interviews honor our families, friends, and elders, the ordinary people we find all around us who, in their day-to-day acts of kindness, courage, and humanity, embody the true spirit of our nation. StoryCorps is a project about permanence in an ever more disposable society. It reminds us that what's really important in the midst of all of our life's distractions, it encourages us to connect despite endless temptations to detach and disengage. On the following pages are 49 stories selected from the 10,000 interviews we've recorded to date. We consider each StoryCorps session sacred, and we place great value on every story that's been recorded as part of the project. It is a joy and an honor for all of us at StoryCorps to do this work, and it's a privilege to share these stories. And I just want to add, before I pass this along, that the town has a project, because in 2025, the town will be 300 years old. So the town has a project where we're recording stories of people of the town of Easton, and then they will be stored for future generations to listen to. Kathy actually has the equipment today. I don't know if we're going to use it today, but yeah, too much ambient noise. Okay.
If you, if you're interested, you can go on the library website, I think, and find out. Once they record it, they're going to post it on the library website, so you can, tell people. And it's stories about Easton. My husband recorded one recently about our interactions with the restaurant Farmer's Daughter, but back when it was Charlie's and Daly's and all the times over time that we used to go there, because we just lived around the corner. But anyway, they want 300 stories about people from Easton, about how you got here, an experience you've had. So hopefully people will participate. And we may be doing it, maybe we'll do it at the NRT Fair.
Yeah. We should. Jen?
Home and family?
Home and family.
Okay. So hi, most of you know me. My name is Jen Tantillo. I'm a teacher at the high school. And so I am here to introduce the home and family section, which is just a brief introduction to this part of the book. When StoryCorps launched, I wasn't sure whether the interviews would resonate with anyone other than the participants and their families. I also suspected that we'd start hearing the same stories repeated over and over again. From the day we opened, I was taken by the power and universality of the recordings coming out of the booth. Most StoryCorps interviews revolve around the 3 great themes of human existence: birth, love, and death. But from these themes emerge an astonishing array of stories. One day, about a year into the project, the senior producer for StoryCorps, Sarah Kramer, came up to me and said, the longer the project runs, the better the stories seem to get. Her words remain true to this day. And our first story, may I steal this? Thank you. From Home and Family is Dr. Richard Collins, who was 81 at the time, interviewed by his grandson, Sean Collins, who was 26 at the time. It was recorded on September 24th, 2005 in New York City. Richard will be read by Jim Abadi, and Sean will be read by Claire Abadi.
I was born in Avon, New York, in 1924, one of 12 children. My father was a country doctor, and it was my father's job when he made calls to take 3 or 4 of us in the car with him to get us out of my mother's hair. When we would arrive at a house to make a call, we were forbidden to leave the car, and we were forbidden to blow the horn unless one of us was dying. So we were pretty constrained. One time I was in the car with my brother Chuck, and my father was delivering a baby, and the time wore on. We were getting pretty bored, so we started exploring his pill case. We started looking at the different colored pills. Then we smelled them. Finally, we tasted them. And we came across ones that tasted like licorice. So we chewed them up. He was smaller than I, so I gave him less than I took. And it turned out that they were something called Evacugen, which was a laxative. And by the time my father came out from his call, we had thoroughly fouled the car, which taught my father a great lesson, and us as well. When I was about 15, my father was working night and day, and I used to drive for him. It was a small town, and the constable used to turn his head when he'd see me driving by with my father down the street, knowing I didn't have a license. My mother used to wake me up at night to drive him for his night calls. And one night in the wintertime, we went up to a farmhouse. I came close to the farmhouse as I could, but because of the snow, it was difficult. I left the headlights on so that he could see his way. And just as he got closer to the farmhouse, the biggest, blackest dog that I ever saw came tearing around the corner of the barn and just took a leap at him. I was terrified, and I was too far away to do anything. But without hesitation, my father swirled the bag up and hit the dog under the jaw, and the dog went down howling back to the barn. When he got back from the call, I said, "Dad, I was so scared. I was afraid that dog was going to get you." And he said, "Always remember one thing, Dick. Never hit a dog until he's got all 4 feet off the ground." Good advice.
What about school?
At St. Agnes Parochial School in the mornings, Sister Edmunda used to have a little toady who would ring a bell. Anybody who came in after that bell was late and got a demerit. And that was a chronic problem I had, getting up a little late. So I grew to hate that bell. One day, I left the lock on the school window open. Later on, I stole back to the school, went in the window, and stole that bell. The next day, there was hell to pay because somebody had taken that bell. Sister said it was a sin against the school. It was a sin against the sisters, a sin against the faith, and a sin against the Pope. And I knew it was such a terrible sin that there was no way I could bring the shame on my family to confess that I confessed to that. So I kept it locked in my heart over those years. And of course, sisters came and sisters went. Popes came and popes went. And I still have that sin locked in my heart.
What did you end up doing with the school bell?
I still have it. It's by my bedside, and I joyfully ring it every now and then. I was just thinking, by the way, of my first grade teacher, a saintly nun, Sister Monica. I eventually became her physician. She was in her 80s, still teaching but running out of gas. And she would come to my office, and I would give her shots of vitamin B12 and anything else I can think of, but nothing was working. So finally, I hit upon a solution. I wrote her a prescription for Spiritus Fermenti, which is Latin for fermented spirits. And she would take the prescription down to the drugstore, and the druggist would pour from a bottle of Shenley's into a medicine bottle. She would take 2 tablespoons before breakfast and 2 before lunch. It worked like a charm. But if she ever come up on the truth of the matter, I'm sure she would have excommunicated me from the faith.
Would you mind telling me a little bit about how you met my grandmother?
No, because she's the absolute light of my life. She came to Avon when I was a sophomore in high school. She was and is a beautiful redhead, and she just grabbed my heart. Although during high school we didn't get along very well, I went out of my way to do little things so that she wouldn't forget me. But they were always the wrong things, and they got me into trouble. I can remember one time we were in a school play called Dollars for Donuts. She was the older girl and I was her bratty brother. And there was one scene in the play where she was supposed to complain about of being faint. And I was supposed to go up and get a little vase of water that has some flowers in it and sprinkle it on her. So before the play, I thought, I'm going to look around school and see if I can find a big vase. So I found a gigantic vase and put a few pussy willows in it and filled it to the brim with water and put it on the piano. It must have been 1.5 gallons of cold water. And she had a brown taffeta dress on. I remember. And in the middle of the play, she said, "Oh, I feel faint." And so I marched up to the piano and I threw out the pussy willows and I dumped that bucket of water on her. And she looked at me for 30 seconds and then she brought one right up from the floor, whacked me across the face, and almost took my head off. I have a condition called dermatographia, where my skin swells if you scratch it very much. So the whole left side of my face went up for the rest of the play. And to this day, the people in Avon say they've never seen such an acting as took place on that stage that day.
So how'd you go from there?
With patience and persistence and timing. I never dated her until I graduated from high school, and then it was a long-distance relationship because I went off to college in medical school. But it worked, and she's been the light of my life ever since. A wonderful woman. Yeah, I've had a good life. Although there are things that we could all do differently if we had the chance, I don't think there are any huge regrets. But I'll have to say that out of all this, I had the great fortune of meeting your grandma. That just changed my whole life, and it's been such a great source of wonder and help to me. So if I'm going to give you any advice, it's to get yourself a pretty redhead like your grandma.
So, did any part of the story resonate with you, or have you ever done something to get the attention of someone that you had a crush on, or the person that you with? Do you have any good stories about how you were able to snag your partner? Anyone?
I was going to say, I think it's relatable because as someone who's in high school, I think that's a very casual occurrence, or if someone has a crush on someone else and, they'll do something or do something nice for them in the halls. But I know I have seen some stories where it's gone wrong or it's kind of funny. So I thought this was really funny. And I think it's cute that they're still together now.
Yeah, definitely.
So I don't know, did you hear what she said? Oh, yeah. Can you just say that a little louder?
Yeah, I was going to say, so as a junior in high school, it's really cute just to see how this couple is still together. And I resonate with it, obviously, because I'm in high school. So it's cute to see how they stayed together through everything. And it's funny because, obviously, crushes are part of high school and people have crushes on each other. And I've seen stuff go wrong, and it's fun. It's kind of funny. And I wish I could see this.
She snapped him across the face. Yeah. And then they ended up getting married, so.
Works out.
Yeah. Anyone else want to share any stories?
I think they're talking over here.
Okay.
So I first met my beautiful wife, Claire, at a New Year's Eve party, 1989, 1990. So I didn't have the time to date for a few months, but I finally called her up just before Memorial Day. And her response to me was, "I'll have to check some of your references first." So that didn't deter me. It just made me more persistent. And finally, I was able to get her to go out with a date on me on Memorial Day, 1990, and that was the start of a beautiful life together.
Yeah. No, I was just in surprise, like 3 months later, he calls to ask me. Slowed into this, so.
3 months and how long? 3 months in women's time.
It is
How long
quite
have you
different.
been married? Or together, I guess. Since 1990, right?
Yeah, 30 years next. 30 years next.
32 years
Thir-
together.
Yeah, 30 years married next April. Yeah.
Oops, sorry. It's nice to hear that your generation is still doing that. I have 3 boys, so they don't tell me anything about well, one of my sons does.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but so I don't really get to see it as much, even though I'm in the high school. Kids don't do that in front of me, so it's nice to see that there's still romance. Definitely.
Anyone else? Okay, we can move on to the introduction of the history and struggle section, and Kathy Ferroni is going to read the introduction to us.
StoryCorps was created to give participants a powerful and at time transformative experience in the booth. Out of these interviews emerge both the story excerpts that we share with the nation and at the archive house at the Library of Congress. These interviews will eventually grow old in oral history of America, painting a picture of who we were and how we lived in the 20th and 21st centuries. History is often told from a top-down perspective, focused on the experiences of politicians and the privileged. StoryCorps will instead create a bottom-up history of our country through the stories and voices of everyday Americans. For future listeners, these interviews will illustrate who we were, what we cared about, and how we lived our day-to-day lives. What follows is a series of personal stories that shine a light on just a few of the touchstone historic events of our time: the Depression, World War II, the Civil Rights era, Vietnam, and the age of AIDS. It is in no way a complete record of all the significant events of the 20th and 21st centuries, but rather a collection of on-the-ground snapshots of a handful of milestones that have helped shape our recent history. And the next reading, the second story is in History and Struggle. It's Mary Kaplan, 60, interviewed by her friend Emily Calzano, 41, recorded on March 3rd, 2004 in New York City. Mary will be read by Patty Summers.
My brother Tom and I were very close. He was around a lot. He was godfather to my son Michael. Tom's partner, well, we didn't call them partners then. Tom's friend got what they called gay cancer. He called me and he told me that Bruce had it. And he said, "Do you know the survival rate?" And I said, "No." And he said, "It's 0. I said, "Tom, I'm a nurse. There's no such thing as 0 survival rate, even with the worst cancers. There can be a 1% survival rate." And he said, "With this, there's a 0. I remember frantically calling everyone and trying to get information. I can't even explain what it was like, because all of a sudden somebody would say, "Don't ask that person. Don't let them know that you know someone that might have this." Tom was always deathly afraid of hospitals, but he went. He was with Bruce the whole time. He never left him. Tom and I used to meet every Tuesday night for dinner. I was at school. It was winter. And he had a stocking cap on, and he looked thinner. And it was cold. He sat down at the table. He had the most gorgeous eyes and eyelashes. And I looked in his eyes and I said, "You're positive, aren't you?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Are you frightened?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Tom, I'll stay with you all the way and we'll do everything we can." He said, "I don't want to take any treatment because there's really nothing there." We talked some more, and I don't remember what we said. I hugged him goodbye. I took the elevator up to my class, and then I sat down. And then all of a sudden it hit me. And I was in class for about 5 minutes. And I got up and I left and I called my husband Dick and I was hysterical, crying. He said, "We'll do everything. We'll do anything." But there wasn't anything to do except be there. So I called Tom. There was some talk of something in Israel and something in Mexico, and I couldn't really rally my family around because people were so afraid of this disease, and he hadn't come out to my mother. It was like the plague. I remember someone in my family being particularly afraid that a mosquito might bite Tom and then bite them, and then they'd have it. No one understood how it was spread. I called Tom and I asked him what we could do, and he said, "I don't want to ever go to the hospital. I don't want to die in the hospital." And I said, "I promise you, I won't. You won't." He got sick very quickly, and I was going to bring him down to the shore for this summer, thinking that that would be good for him. He always dressed so nicely. He wore blue Oxford button-downs. So Friday, I got to his apartment, and his blue shirt was on the floor, and he was just lying there in a daze. I knew he was dehydrated because his eyes were sunken in. He said, "Don't panic." I said, "I'm not the panicking type, Tom." Inside, I panicked. I had made a bed in the back of the car to take him down to the shore, and I went and I got his friend to help me get him out of the car because I knew I couldn't get him out alone. He said, "I don't want to be in a hospital." I said, "Tom, I'm just going to stop at the hospital just to get you something to make you comfortable. But I promise you, I'm not going to leave you there. I'm going to bring you home." So I took him to New Jersey to the hospital. It was June 1986, and it was very hot. And I went to the emergency room and I said, "I need a stretcher. My brother's outside. He's sick and he needs something for pain." And they said, "What's wrong with him?" And I said, "He has AIDS." They wouldn't come out and get him. He was out there. It was 99 degrees, and by this time, he was starting to get comatose, and I said, "If you don't come out and get him, I will pick him up and carry him in there and sit in the waiting room with him on my lap." That's what I was going to do. And then they all scurried, and they all donned these suits, kind of like an E.T., and they came out. I remember one nurse said to another, "Is he dead?" I just wanted to smash her. And they took him in, and I kept talking to him, and a doctor came down, this very nice woman doctor, and she said, "I can give him IVs and bring him back to consciousness, but he has meningitis and parasites, and he won't live long." I said to the doctor, "No, he doesn't want IVs. I'm a nurse, and I can take care of him at home. I think he needs some morphine, and he's going to become incontinent, and he's going to need some other things." I knew the things he would need, and I asked her for them. She was very good. She gave them to me. I had to get a private ambulance to bring him home. The minute they moved him over to the ambulance, everyone started running in with disinfectants and masks, as if he wasn't even a human being. I brought him home. The children were there, and we all took care of him. And I promised him I wouldn't leave the room. So they would bring me up sandwiches. I had to call my mother. I had to tell her he was gay, that he had AIDS, and he was dying all at once. I sat with Tom and I said, "You know, whenever you want to go, it's okay. I'll take care of Mom, and I'll take care of everything." And then he didn't go. And then I said, "Tom, I don't want you to think I'm rushing you, but so you don't have to go. I can't sing, and everyone knows I can't sing. And it was a big joke in my family But I found myself, like I did with my children, singing lullabies. And I sang, "Turaluraluri," to him one time. And I was so off key. And when I finished, I kissed him on the forehead and said, "I'm sorry. I know that wasn't very good." And I went in the bathroom. And when I came back, he wasn't breathing. He died the moment I left. Grief is when you get up the next day and you see the sun and you say, "Will I ever think the sun is beautiful again?" And all the normal parts of grieving. But the other parts were so hard. When the other part was so hard, I had this very educated woman come up to me and say, "Well, don't you think God is telling us something by letting these homosexuals die by this disease?" I just wanted to slap her around. I wanted to physically harm her. And I said, "No, I don't think so." One day I went to a card shop and there was a gay young man who worked there. And I was buying a sympathy card, another sympathy card for one of Tom's friends. And this young man said something and I said, "Well, I take care of my brother's friends. My brother died of AIDS." And I said it in a whisper. And he said, "You don't have to whisper to me." And he came around the counter and he hugged me. And I didn't know him, but I loved him. You think? Yeah. I don't know how you made it.
In caring for her dying brother, Tom, Mary Kaplan observed firsthand how individuals who contacted the AIDS virus were treated in the early days of the outbreak, when there was not much known about the disease. How did her story help you to understand the panic and misinformation that marked those early days? How did both Kaplan's nursing experience and her love for her brother help her get through the last stages of the disease with him?
This one's too hard for me, as you can tell.
I think that, when people don't have information, right, misinformation breeds fear, right? And that's what comes to me when I read this story, because it's so sad, because if you don't know, it's wrong, it's not right, but this is what happens when people don't have information about anything. It could be a disease, it could be a person, you don't know, if I don't know you, you may be afraid of me if you don't know me. And I think that's part of the reason why we are doing this book club, right? Because we really want to bring people together to share information and hopefully become a stronger community because of it. Do you have something you want to say? Do you have something to say? Okay.
I think that's certainly true. The fear of the unknown is what we're looking at here. I think we went through it just recently with COVID, when COVID first came out, and we didn't quite understand what that was all about either. And in a broader spectrum, the fear of other races, other religions, etc., is something that I think education and understanding is certainly going to help to overcome all of that. Just the same way that we overcame our fear of AIDS, we understood finally what it was all about and that whole transmission, et cetera, et cetera. And as we're understanding more about COVID, how that fear has been allayed. So certainly the same thing for everybody is hopefully what we can all achieve. I don't know how long it's going to take, which is unfortunate. If I could snap my fingers and have it happen overnight, that would be the best of all worlds, but it's not to be, unfortunately. I'm hoping that as the internet has been such a great tool in disseminating information to people, but unfortunately that information can be either good or bad. So hopefully in this technological age that we can certainly grow closer together, one nation, one world nation, as opposed to all divided.
Thank you. Very well said. Anyone else? Yeah. Okay. So what we try to do, so we always have 4 stories lined up, but depending on the conversation, we don't always get to all 4. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is we always like to, because these stories are so emotional and just, sometimes hard to digest and the conversation gets heavy, we like to end on a positive story so that people leave, hopefully, laughing and not crying. Although crying's not a bad thing, right? Crying's not a bad thing. So yes, Jen, I think that's a great idea.
From the bottom of my heart, because I don't think I could have got through that story.
Yeah, we're all growing, and as a team, I feel like I really am enjoying this time. But okay, so we're going to skip story number 3 because it's really sad, and we will move on to story 4. And Kathy Foster will introduce the section.
Hi, I'm Kathy Foster. I'm a member of the Easton Human Rights Committee. And this next section is work and dedication, and I'll read the introduction. Facilitators are both the core and core of StoryCorps, the project's frontline workers and ambassadors who accompany participants through the interview process. The qualifications are simple. They must be extraordinary listeners and have a quality about them that puts people at ease. Facilitators are hired for a 1-year term and typically spend 9 months working in New York City and 3 months on the road with one of our mobile booths. Any number of facilitators have told me the most important lesson they learn over the course of their service has to do with judging others. Never assume from how people look that you understand who they really are. Many also say they have come to recognize a simple truth, that people are basically good. At the end of the facilitator's 1-year term of service, they're sprinkled back into the world, having recorded hundreds of stories and listened in on the wisdom of humanity. So the next story, or the last story in this section, is Rick Kincaid, 53, interviewed by his friend Danny Terry, 60, recorded on April 30th, 2006 in Austin, Texas. And Rick is going to be read by Kathy Ferroni.
Page 79.
Rick Kincaid. I was born in Tyler, Texas, and grew up in Cayuga, Texas. We used to make the comment that we were so back in the woods. We had to go towards town to hunt. We came from basically uneducated families and backwoods hillbilly folks. No one had any money. We were just dirt poor. My mother was a Pentecostal preacher, so there was always a battle between her and my dad as far as living a good life. She wanted him off the road from playing what we used to call hillbilly music and wanted him in the church playing gospel music. He finally did give it up, and him and Mother got a tent, and we had a tent revival in the early 50s. We traveled all around East Texas and put the tent up preaching revivals. There was a lot of unusual things for a little boy my age to be seeing in those days. They would cast out demons in those tents, and then that night we had to sleep in there. So it was a little scary. We figured the devil's gonna hang around and get a hold of us. So I'd sleep there in that old cot and put Bibles all around me. Probably the thing that scared me the most about the religion I was raised up in, Mother being, like I said, a Pentecostal preacher, she was also what they call a prophet. I remember one night my mother stopped a service right in the middle of her preaching, and she approached a man sitting on a bench, and told him that she saw the number 3 over his head, and that meant if he didn't get saved that night and give his heart to the Lord, he was going to be dead in 3 days. It wasn't what she said that night that scared me, but 3 days later, that man fell dead in the kitchen. Was an aneurysm in his brain. That scared me. I was 25 years old when Occidental Petroleum hired me. I ended up as a welder in the oil field until the oil field failed. In 1980, there were no jobs in the petroleum industry. I had a friend was a bail bondsman, and I worked for him. One day, we hired a fellow to chase one down for us, and seeing how much money he was making, I figured I wanted to do that. So I spent 11 years as a bounty hunter. When a man goes to jail for a certain crime, the judge will set this man's bond, and the bail bondsman will bail this man out for a certain fee. Now, this man is obligated to show up to court on a certain day. If that fella doesn't show up, they assume that he was absconded. A lot of times, a bail bondsman will try to find him. If they're unsuccessful, then they'll call in a bounty hunter. Our job is to go find this man and get him arrested. There's probably 300 or 400 people that I've chased down and locked up. I worked in Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Florida. We built up a good reputation as a real hard-nosed bounty hunters. We got a reputation to where some fellows would find out we were chasing them and they just put themselves in jail. There was one young fellow where it became a matter of principle. He really wasn't in all that much trouble. I think I was only getting about $300 to pick him up. But every time we go to his house, he would take off out that back door and hit them woods, and we just couldn't catch him. So after 3 or 4 times going to this young man's house to pick him up, he always ran on us. We decided one night we were going to get him. We went over to my uncle's house and picked up the fishing net. We strapped that thing around the front porch of his house. We beat on the back door and took off out the front and got tangled up in the net. We got him in jail by 3 o'clock that morning. It became a pretty good joke around Smith County on how we got caught. Probably one of the toughest cases we had. I won't call the old boy's name out, but he was from Sulphur Springs, Texas, and there was $100,000 jump bond on him. When we started chasing him, it was for aggravated kidnapping on his ex-wife. However, once we got the job and signed the contract, we came to find out that he was a big-time methamphetamine drug dealer. So we figured we were up against a little bit more than we had originally bargained for. I chased him for about 7 months. That was a long, hard chase. We had several problems catching this old boy. The night that we got him, some of the Cherokee County Sheriff Department was supposed to hit the house about the same time I did. I went in first, and unbeknownst to them or to us, it was a drug lab. I walked right in the middle of it, and they got me on the floor and began to beat me pretty good. They broke my jaw and my cheekbone and knocked out a couple of teeth. Then they started asking questions and began to pull my teeth out with some old pliers because I couldn't really answer any questions. I was in too much pain. So I was sure proud to see when the sheriff department finally did break in there and get me out of that. I figured that was going to be the end. And that was the night I retired from bounty hunting. I walked down the road to where my wife was sitting in the van and told her that I'd be retiring that night. That was about as close to death as I wanted to get. April 30th, 2006. Quite a story.
I guess Mother Nature is not cooperating with us today at all. So we do have some questions related to this story. I hope you all were able to at least follow along in your books. Norma is going to be asking the discussion questions related to that story.
Give it a try. So as you just heard, Rick took on quite an unusual job to provide for his family.
He had an unusual job to provide for his family.
Being a bounty hunter, what part of his story did you find compelling?
What part of the story
It was.
I think when they started pulling his teeth out, it was very compelling. I can't imagine. And then I looked at the picture to see how many teeth he was missing. You did too.
Anyone else?
There's certainly a lot of danger.
Yeah, there's a second discussion question. I didn't know if we read it or
Did you have something to say on the first one? Compelling? What did you find anything compelling about the story?
Well, I think the story was interesting. It kind of reminds me of, unusual ways that I've kind of helped out around the neighborhood and stuff like that. And I like the friendship aspect of it too, you know what I mean? Like developing like bonds. I thought that was really interesting and I really liked it.
So Norma's going to ask, you pass that back? The second question. Nice and loud, Norma.
Okay. We're wondering if any of you have ever taken on a challenging job, and if so, did it make you stronger, having endured the struggle that was involved, the challenge? Certainly.
I kind of relate to this because I work in retail and I work at American Eagle. Yeah. So definitely, I won't. Definitely retail is an interesting job and you have people coming in every day who sometimes can give you a hard time, And as like a teenager working in the retail industry, you don't really know how to deal with that. You've never really been dealt with adults who are kind of, coming at you for what you're doing or, the way that you're doing things. So I think that especially the bond that I've created with a lot of my coworkers has made the job much easier. Like we help each other out. We work as a team. And I related to that story when he had all of his friends and family helping him out. And he created this really strong bond. So I thought it was really interesting, and I felt with that as well.
Anyone else? I'm curious, Sophia, because you are a junior. You're going to be a junior, and this is the reading for the whole junior class at Oliver Ames. So what are your thoughts so far from the little bit that you have experienced with us?
I think that this is definitely a new take of book that OA has done. Normally we get a book that is fiction and it follows one character, but I honestly think that this book is very inspirational in the sense that you're hearing from real people and real struggles and situations that the people of America have been through in all different times, and I think that it's for anyone. There's a story for anyone in here, and it can bring a lot of people together. It can also help you understand different perspectives of what people have gone through and see different lights that maybe you haven't got to see or hear from, and you only see it on the media. So I think that it definitely draws light and attention to real world struggles from real world people and makes it more relatable.
Oh, awesome answer. You have a pretty good kid there.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just impressed. I always kind of find the summer reading always a lot of negative, but I think the truth of this, you know what I mean, and the fact that they're real stories, I think kind of captured the kids and made it just much more interesting for them.
Yeah,
Agreed. It's really.
So thank you, team. Right? We had a team of people, and Kathy and Jen were on the team of people that decided on this book. So I don't want to keep anyone who really needs to go, but I do want to just say a few things. Thank you for volunteers and everyone who came. Also, the community gathering that was planned for Wednesday, we are canceling it. We are not having the community gathering on Wednesday this week, but we are going to be doing something at the Harvest Fair at the NRT. And we haven't ironed out the details yet, but we'll hopefully have some of the recording equipment, and members of the Easton community can come out and record yourselves and your story. Anyone else have anything you'd like to say? We good? All right, thank you so much. Thank you.